Switches clatter in their sockets, levers quivering with restrained energy. The captain's chair threatens to shake loose from its bolts. Jervik grits teeth, fingers tightening on armrests, the worn leather rough and grounding against calloused palms. The ship steadies as massive hangar bay doors grind to a halt. "Bob's your uncle, Kirkstand 556677. Come in, please. This is Star Marie 67799. Bay entrance 956-8 is prepped for landing. Permission to activate uniceps granted. Safe landing. Last out 345611. Stamp." The intercom buzzed to life with a staticky interference that felt like its own accent at this point. "Jones, your aunt, Star Marie 67799, Bay entrance 956-8, loud and clear, uniceps engaged, last out 345667, stamp." The words bled from his mouth with muscle memory. With a deft flick, Jervik eases engines to 5%. The ship stirring, a low vibration sifts through the hull. An error light blinks. Autopilot refuses to engage. Jervik rolled his eyes, flipping the switch repeatedly before conceding. "Bob's your uncle, Star Marie 67799. This rust bucket's autopilot is shot. Permission to manual. Last out 345795. "Jones, your aunt, Kirkstand 556677. Manual approved. Last out 345846. Jervik lowers the chair into piloting mode, hands settling on the throttle, feet finding the declination adjuster. Jervik guides the metallic masterpiece of structural engineering into its perfectly made bed, a marvel despite its age. Throttle cuts to 0. Release switch flips. A silent prayer rises. Trailer arms retract, the ship resonating like a struck bell, the chimes sharp in the ears. Jervik unbuckles, exhaling, and pushes off the chair, floating upward. Fingers curl around the ladder to the ceiling hatch, its metal cold and pitted. A familiar texture. Relief floods through. Another stellar landing. The access port opens to rails in vivid hues. Yellow for the canteen, orange for the cockpit, green for the engine, blue for cargo. Labels mark each color every 10 meters. Jervik grasps the yellow railing, its surface smooth, the paint breaking off and scattering with each lunge. A single chair and a flimsy table, like a cheap folding tray, await in the canteen. The table's surface bears creases outlining 4 squares. Jervik settles into the company standard metal chair, its rigid back biting into the spine. Each square depresses under deft fingers, sinking into compartments. Hoses along the table's edges hum, clicking faintly as they pump nutrient ooze into the sections. The air fills with a warm, nostalgic aroma: salt, pork, mashed potatoes. Jervik inhales deeply, savoring the scent, eyes closing to summon a memory of meals from a distant life. The intercom blares, shattering the reverie. Jervik jerks upright, snarling. "Jervis, frick, I'm eating!" The fork clatters against the speaker, its metallic ping echoing. Fingers press against a throbbing forehead, frustration simmering. The message crackles. "Bob's your uncle, Kirkstand 556677. Come in, UNICEF sections 1357 to 1538. Need a reset. Remote override failed. Request manual local override. Last out 347054. Stamp." "Useless robots," Jervik mutters, glaring at the untouched meal, its savory steam fading. Duty tugs, relentless. Jervik considers defiance, sinking back into the chair, the cold metal a fleeting anchor. No, this was the last straw. Those incompetent whelps could shove it. He sat down, closed his eyes. He took his time eating, savoring it as if it was his last. The buzzing on the intercom for confirmation turned to satisfying music. Jervik never responded. A mental map traces the fastest route to the cargo bay, targeting overrides at units 1300, 1400, and 1500. Jervik drifts through portholes, navigating the ship's labyrinth with ease. The hull's faint creaks a constant companion. This outdated heap deserves the scrapyard, Jervik grumbles, voice bouncing off walls, the air tinged with a faint, oily scent. I will never be as friendly with anyone, but I know they will treat me better than her. Memories flicker as Jervik glides through the ship. This contract for Unihall, uncovering desires beyond imagining, the feats sown by men, from analog to digital, from pipes and valves to terminals and neural links. Yet the unknown gnaws, a persistent ache. Peers, now dead, climb to business class, their ambition outlasting their lives. Jervik chooses the longest routes, craving the galaxy's edge, but solitude lingers like a bitter aftertaste. A dream persists, a ship to call one's own, a legacy beyond this creaking relic. The first override looms. Jervik's fingers brush gritty safety straps, their coarse texture a reminder of the ship's age. Undoing them takes an hour. Unfasten, flip, reset, resecure. Machinery hums, latches clattering as the system reboots. Success. Sweat beads on Jervik's brow, the air heavy with a metallic tang. 2 more resets await, a daunting prospect. After the final reset, Jervik stretches, gripping the catwalk's frigid, textured railing, its ridges biting into palms. Below, machines drone, handling cargo with relentless precision. A craving for a drink surges, sharp and familiar. Is the edge slipping? Jervik descends to the station's commercial level, drawn to its fleeting comforts. Jervik floats through the station's access tunnels, the air cool and stale, carrying a faint hum of distant machinery. Catwalk's railing, slick with condensation, guides the way. Thoughts churn. Another reset. Another day on this rusting ship. The commercial level's neon glow beckons, promising escape, however brief. Jervik adjusts the jacket's collar, its worn fabric brushing the neck, and steps into the bustling deck, where the scent of liquor and sweat already lingers. The neon glow of the sign pulsed in the dimness, a siren's call. The station, like every other, a rusted shell of monotony, offered no warmth, no belonging. Jervik stepped inside, the air thick with stale alcohol and sweat, the hum of voices punctured by rough laughter. Stragglers attempting to get their cut of these poor souls loomed in the shadows, hull hoppers as they were known. They lured men to their fate over these fawns, their eyes sharp, picking out marks. One sways toward a mechanic, hips rolling, fingers grazing his chest with a teasing smile. "Come on, big guy," she purrs, voice smooth and velvet, her breath carrying a hint of sweet wine. He grins, ensnared. He ambled to the counter, nodding at the quadcept as it rolled over, its treads scraping the floor. "I owe it a dumpling, hardline that," he muttered, leaning on the dented bar. The machine's arms danced, mixing his drink with flair, and Jervik's gaze drifted. One by one they strode to a man, coaxing him with taunting, playful quips, touches, and smiles, pressing close, a whisper, and they were off. The quadcept slid his drink over, the glass cool against his palm. He knocked it back, the burn a sharp kick to his senses. Rougher than he'd hoped, but it did the trick. He ordered another, eyes sweeping the room. Hull hoppers outnumbered patrons as the night deepened. He dispatched a few more drinks, and as the liquid courage builds, he makes his move. Jervik approaches a hopper with jade-green eyes, her gaze glinting like polished stone. "Rough shift," Jervik says, hands in pockets, fingers brushing the coarse lining. "Do you drink on the job, or is that just for us sorry types?" She tilts her head, smirking, her voice low and probing. "Depends who's paying, spacer." Her fingers toy with a bracelet, its metal clinking softly. "You don't look like you've got much." Jervik forces a grin, jaw tight. "Enough for a round, maybe." The words carry a cautious edge, testing her. Her eyes cool, dismissive. "Busy enough." She turns away, her heels clicking on the floor, a sharp rebuke. Patrons snicker, their laughter a dull roar in Jervik's ears. Retreating to the bar, Jervik closes the tab, the quadcept's hum fading as the door hisses shut. The station's corridors stretch ahead, dim and humming with machinery. Jervik's boots echoed as he trudged to the cargo manifest terminal, his mind churning, dreams of a ship, a way out, anything but this. The station's corridors stretched ahead, dim and humming with machinery. Jervik's boots echoed as he trudged to the cargo manifest terminal, his mind churning, dreams of a ship, a way out, anything but this. At a terminal, he slumped into the chair, the screen's glow blurring through the haze of drink. Jervik mused at the routes he could take if he owned a vessel as he bumped and bounced his way to his quarters. The first struggle would be learning a new style of ship. If he ever got the opportunity, he wanted a much faster ship. Size was of no consequence as long as it had a hitch that could manage Unihull's demands. Blinking behind red-lined eyes and deep purple bags, Jervik floated into his bed unit. He was asleep before strapping himself in. Alert! Containment present. Air quality below 20%. Advise repairs on station 70-5672. The cabin flashes red, green, blue, cycling with the PA's urgent drone. Jervik blinks against the light, scrambling for the railing, its familiar surface steadying, and pushes toward the engine room. Steam hisses from pipes, the air thick with a metallic tang, sharp in the nostrils. Could it be a grease clog in the dispensing unit of the filtration section? It had been 9 years without inspection. If there was a leak, without proper parts, he would be stranded. Thinking about alternate scenarios, as he made his way through the steaming pipes and protruding valves with the jumbled makeshift scaffolding, hands, guided by muscle memory, navigate valves and scaffolding, their surfaces slick with oil. Red and green lights flicker on panels, CO2 levels spiking. The chemical mix unit shows no leaks. Options dwindle. Looking around at the hunk of mechanical death, thoughts of this ship being his coffin welled. Focus. The air is thinner. Your mind is wandering. Pay attention. What's the problem? He ordered himself as if he was an ensign again. The chemical mix boxes yield the fault. Adjusting the box to press the hose into the liquid, he watched the gauges above it slowly begin to normalize. He floated there, covered in sweat, wheezing for breath as he felt the comforting blow of the air circulating. Smashing his fist against the piping and instantly regretting it, Jervik grabbed the railing and pulled himself along towards the canteen. A good wind-down was required. The PA crackles. "Bob's your uncle, Kirkstand 556677. Are you good? Need assist? Detected life support failure. Please respond. Last out. 235667 stamp." Jervik shakes his head, muttering, "Worthless loaders. Only notice when the lights stop flashing." The canteen chair creaks as Jervik settles, fingers flipping through news channels and investment logs, their tips brushing the table's slick surface. 9 years on this route. Savings inch towards 43% of a new ship. 3 days until Uniceps reload the tankers for sternum 93, 94, 95. The next destination. The oldest manned station on the edge of the crystal cusp, the tail end of one wing of the galaxy. He rolled his eyes. 13 years one way. He switched the news to information on upcoming stock options pertaining to newly developed technology since he had last docked. The options were as limitless as ideas, words, sports, objects, religions. The accumulated value of the human species was tested in real time, upgrading the outer and older stations, allowing the central humanity AI to gather all information. Humans consider these 5 concepts above all else: quantum technology, coffee, sex, uranium-235, Sethism. Thus, they have been commodified into their own currency system, an NFT-based cryptocurrency that allows the NFT of a concept to represent the established backed value of that idea. It can then be used as a method of currency. This allows ideas to be shared and spread through the crypto stock. He had missed out on the rise of quantum technology. The others were way before his time, when the ship was in its prime, the lead freighter. Now it stumbled and limped behind them like a fossil needing to be put out of its misery. In that moment, what flashed on the screen brought his nose crashing against the monitor. The sting brought him back to reality. The words escaped aloud. New emerging theory connects the principles of quantum entanglement of data sending and places it into the realm of physical objects. sending a ship anywhere in the galaxy instantly. It was unheard of. It would change everything. The wait. A few hundred years, equivalent to a few months, 4 at most. This was his advantage over people. The decision was to invest everything available before it was too late. The rest of the layover was dedicated to calculating the longest routes for the next shipping output, aiming to maximize cryo-sleep periods over the next 150 years. Utilizing the one freedom available, the choice of how to effectively move all the products, he planned to deviate from the algorithm. Whether the investment paid off or the ship broke down, it wouldn't matter either way. With a refined confidence, Jervik retired to the cryo chamber with a smile and a new hope for the future. Dreaming of grand desires, a great new world opened to him. His new route would be 15 years, the shortest route for the next 20 or so destinations. He clambered out of the cryopod with a joyous, almost childish, giddy nature. He looked at the graphs of the stock, 1.1% increase. He could have jumped if there was gravity to do so. The next bunch of hauls went by like a rushing river, waiting for the inevitable push to the sea. His calculations had been on the low end. Astonishment at the growth of the technology sent him into a fervor. Investments opened for withdrawal on his Stargate crypto stock. He had his eye on a specific Slinky class. He had already put out an offer for a few over the last decade. He had no responses as of yet. The maneuverability and structural integrity of the Slinky class ship, which was able to extend itself out using multiple engines to keep pressure steady across the ship. This enabled a 40% reduced time for deceleration. More deliveries, more money, more investment, more money. He would play the cycle and continue to monitor how the public viewed the Stargate technology. They had not wanted to accept it at first, thinking back to the histories of old Earth in the 21st century and the rise of the minor AIs at the time. The people struggled against the change that AI could produce, altering the direction and the speed of human technological development. With the ability to instantly travel anywhere with the Stargate technology, it would threaten a lot of business as well. This would be a good time to dip out on a business lease ship, such as the Kirkstand 556677. To be able to name your own ship, this left him wondering, did he have a namesake worth his legacy? He never had a wife or any children. He had 2 brothers, he was the oldest, and they always looked up to him. He could feel the weight of their reverence upon his shoulders. It had been a burden worth carrying, at least for the start. He had always been fascinated with wanting to see the edge of the galaxy and how far human civilization had been pushed. His family was accepting of his desire to be a trucker. They knew what it entailed and how it would affect them. They worried that their son did not truly grasp the concept himself. So it was not for themselves they pushed back, but for his own sake. The gold fades after use, though, and that had landed him in the predicament that forced him into placing all his pickles in one jar over the Stargate technology crypto stock. Now thousands of years had passed. If he had any relatives out there, it would be extremely hard to find them. The data reset over 2,000 years ago due to the implementation of quantum AI. It is said to be a conspiracy by the Upper Governmental Institutes of Humanity's Conglomerate United Association to press the past of crimes and the solving of immortality to keep them in control forever. Musings of fanatics no one truly took seriously. The fact they could figure out how to send data instantly anywhere in the universe once it was quantum entangled, but they couldn't figure out how to make it all compatible with old data sets. It did sound ridiculous, but it was a bureaucracy after all. There was no limit to the idiocy of its components. Waking up to the satisfying sound of pressurized gas as the oxygen filled the room, the cool air feeling soft against his skin. Staring at the faded gray wall, ambitions bold, a sense of pride that had escaped his grasp. Jervik unstrapped himself and stepped out of the pod. Walking to the cargo door, he made his way through the access ports to the cockpit. Strapping in and moving the chair into pilot mode, he began the D-spin cycle. The weight lifting off of him was the procedure a practiced and calming moment. It took him back to the days of piloting mining freighters and asteroid belts, his first jobs before he moved into the trucking business. He had hated working with people and figured this was a better opportunity. The silence allowed him to concentrate, to think. He flipped the switch for the intercom to hail the approaching asteroid base. "Bob's your uncle, Glurgalic 346710. This is Kirkstand 556677. This is my last haul in this hunk. So let's get this over with, peeps. Last out, 874523 stamp. James your aunt, Kirkstan 556677. This is Glurgalic 346710. You are cleared for landing. Bay doors 6754-343-12. Dock is prepared. Please proceed. Last out, 874856 stamp. Autopilot hums, a rare success. Uniceps engage smoothly. Jervik yawns, back cracking, anticipation bubbling. Unstrapping, Jervik drifts to the canteen, the railing's austere grip guiding. He sat down at the table and turned to the terminal. At last, a response. Garritan 4545, a Slinky Class 5000 with 12 engines and 13 compartments, with a deceleration capability of 1.2%, whereas the Kirkstan 556677 was a 46%. This indicated the time during the travel where the deceleration process would need to be started in order to successfully and safely slow the ship down. Those numbers were pretty good for its price. The age was concerning, but he had no other options at this point. He sent out a new message with his concerns over the ship before finalizing an inspection in person. He looked at the cargo log, studying its past hauls, checking its repair logs. He wanted to make sure he was not buying another piece of junk. He sent his offer. It was only 5% cheaper, but he knew the ways of negotiation. An automated message came back stating, "Owner deceased. Purchase a vessel available through impound. Please follow instructions of purchase for product." He sighed. No haggling with the government. Price was set. This worked in Jervik's favor because he could dock the Kirkstan 556677 and not pay a towing fee. Discount acquired. He began the registration process with a smile. Things were going his way. He looked over the new manifesto of schematics and data logs from the original logs. They lined up with the previous assessment. There would be no surprises. The inspections were well handled and documented, so the value of buying from the government is the security of the product. Sold. He had requested a midway drop point for a sum. It was worth it, cutting 23 years off of the trip. What could he call it? It came to him as he laughed, of course. 57 RU 6613 R5 C0 V3 Struggler's Cove. It was perfect. With a newfound position in life, as if he had gained access to the next level, having enough resources to be self-sufficient, relying on others had never been his strong suit or a way of life. He liked to stand on his own and show his worth through his actions. His destination was set. The company knew. His ends were tied. Back to cryostasis. Stations loomed before him as he sat down on the pilot chair. The display screens across the front were set to visual. He had not used these settings for years. A final memento for carrying him across the galaxy, peering one last time from her eyes into the vastness of existence. May she rest in peace and not obtain a new owner, for her sake as much as theirs. A towering sight, imposing, reminding him of his first years in space. The scope of human engineering and construction never ceased to amaze him. He had been in government sectors before, but nothing made within the last several thousand years. This abomination that lay before him was a Dyson sphere, amassing the energy of the sun, not for its purpose in light for solar panels, but its fusion heat. It was called the Behemoth for a reason. The main hub of the multi-layered, multi-connected space scrapers, like a spiked ball, it reminded him of an engine core. Nuclear energy has been the main technology behind fuel for 9,000 years. Once the problem of creating and containing an artificial sun became reality, the stars were now just another conquered milestone of mankind. Like the oceans of Earth by ancient man or the planet itself once they had basic flight, those who once said it was beyond our reach truly did not see the extent of the human spirit and will to achieve greatness. He would be a part of something that pushed galaxies to this point. With Stargates across the universe, humanity would be unstoppable. What grand new horizon would there be to discover? The edge of the universe itself would bend to their will. The PA system came to life, and with it, his senses. "Bob's your uncle, Kirkstan 556677. You are cleared for docking at Bureau Bay 5432-34-654. Last out 676523 stamp. bay doors buzzed open, and there she was. The Garatan 4545, looming like a beacon of hope inside the hangar. The compartment nodes starkly contrasting the iron fiber reinforced rubber folds that held the seals in place. The single Southern-style engine protruding beneath the landing struts. Structural. The spectacle shook him. This was his. He walked up the landing ramp to begin the inspection. He had never worked with this style of technology. Requiring a bit of training on the computer systems was humbling. He knew how to work with analog systems tied into a computer terminal. However, all accessibility on the Garatan 4545 was through a terminal. This simplified the physical aspect of the troubleshooting system. At the same time, it was a pool of knowledge to learn the nuances and caveats of system integration and direct link control terminals. The old days of standing pipes and exposed rigging were over. The halls were fine-fitted fake marble, sleek and pristine. The previous owner of this ship seemed to have kept it as a relic, a model of restoration from the past. The operator, wiry with a clipped tone, greets. Impressive, isn't she? Terminal-based systems, no analog clutter. Pride tinges his voice, hands gesturing precisely. New tech's a challenge, Jervik replies, fingers tracing the polished wall, its glass smooth, surface cool. But manageable. The inspection flows, the operator's guidance efficient. Jervik masters terminal controls, intuitive yet complex. The ship's hum a steady pulse. It flew well, the systems were intuitive, and before he knew it, the test drive felt like he was on the Kirkstand 556677 again. The rattle in the chair was replaced by the excitement he presented. The ship was in standing order. They redocked on the station and proceeded to the main terminal to complete the transfer of the Kirkstand 556677 and the Garatan 4545. Jervik renamed the ship 57RU6613R5 C0V3, registering it officially. Placing a hand on the landing strut of the Kirkstand 556677, Jervik said a silent goodbye, a gesture of good luck, a habit lost to time. Only the most sentimental would understand. In his case, it was a feeling of relief that this mechanical junk heap had not ended him. Struggler's Cove's cockpit embraced Jervik, the chairs cushioning soft against the back. Crypto stocks soared, quadrupling wealth. Freedom from Unihall dawns. A freelance trucker now. Jervik registers a company. Keys clicking on the terminal, their cool plastic steadying fingers. Stock earnings fund a crew. Jervik's name spreads across the outer wings. Stations praising quantum data receiver deliveries. Captains clamor to join, messages flooding the screen, its glow warm against the face. Jervik sifts logs seeking reliable captains. As a trucker, there's little reason to ever revisit a station. The promiscuous nature of living on a station in the middle of space. Possibility, your whole lifetime of not seeing anyone besides the other colonists or employees. Crimes of passion and affairs of the flesh were all too common in this forsaken sector. Jervik didn't mind that, but keeping an eye out to prevent the company name from being slandered became a priority. The other two at the end of the list would be held for the future if they were still available. Jervik wanted the reputation of his company to speak for itself, and lured the best of the best to him. The routes passed as sands wavering across the desert, pressing peaks further and further. He aimed for the infinite. The numbers didn't lie. The business was doing very well. It was the contrast that made Jervik shake his head. It felt like all his work was for naught. The money was building, but not at the rate the Stargate investment was. 83% of his wealth came from the crypto stock. With 8 other captains hauling for him, the cost of doing business was great. Jervik had expected it to be a rough start, just like the investments. Something inside said he was better off as a businessman than a trucker. The thought caused unease. The years passing, gaining more. There were several prototype Stargates now in circulation. The technology was sending people into a panic. An unexpected message popped up on his terminal. The Stargate startup company, stating that their main investors over the years were invited to a showcase of the technology, and only the government and higher military departments had access to. This could be the first public press demonstration. The Struggler's Cove pulled in beside the mob of ships surrounding the spectacle that was this showcase. A massive ring that appeared to be several thousand meters in diameter spun slowly and freely to the side of the hulking mass of a station. Jervik docked the ship. He joins the other investors in the main showroom at the station, the crowd of scientists, researchers, and businessmen all clamoring for each other's attention. Jervik strategically picked out the ends of the queues, popping in, mentioning a small quip about his status, or about his company and why he was here. He was building interest around his travels to the outer wing and how he had connected thousands of stations to the edge of humanity, enlarging the circle of expansion that his Stargate ultimately would lead to. Intergalactic travel. When these discussions happened, most people would never reach the end goal of this thought process. This was no exception. If we take the time and do it correctly, Jervik stated to the younger businessman, I have traveled about 80% of the way there in my years as a trucker. Heck, slop, there's no way. That'd be over 8,000 years. 9,354, actually, Jervik responded keenly with a smirk. You young'uns know not the old days. I'm glad I can move towards the next generation alongside you. He patted the man on the shoulder. Drinks and laughs were shared as Jervik made his way through the crowds, building awareness and presence for his company. He had received offers from captains. The potential of this endeavor was rising. There was an announcement that the demonstration would be starting soon, and all participants should return to their ships for alignment. Jervik sat in the captain's chair waiting instructions. The new autopilot on the Struggler's Cove could sync and lock with the main structure, its twisting spires pressed across the surface of a plated ball. Each one a different lab for different research. The main product of this lab was nanochips. The technology of the quantum connectors had been set in each piece, allowing them to connect to create a larger device. This would allow Stargates to be built at any scale and size, from human travel to maybe even spaceports and stations. It would make building new stations on the edge of nowhere viable. This would mean an end to colony ships or cryo-travels for inhabitants of those new systems. It would also mean they were not leaving everything behind. The expansion of humanity would boom once more among the cosmos. Galaxies would be a mere step away. The thoughts mused through Jervik's head as the CEO of the company was making his speech about the day's events and the procedure to sign up for being the first offered when going to market. Jervik sat in his captain's chair watching the proceedings when it happened. The ship that entered the portal never responded. The gate shook and the portal evaporated. Panic and confusion on the main presentation team was evident. Solemn look on their faces as they bowed to the audience in apology. The Stargate on the end had exploded. The ship was unmanned. No one was injured. The exit was in a remote area, so there was nothing to worry about. The technology has some glitches, and time is not yet for it to be in the public. They groveled and begged to try and save face. Jervik knew it would take a hit, but he had confidence in the technology. It just needed to be refined. It proved it worked. It was just human inaccuracy that led to these. Eventually, that would be cut out, and the new age of instant travel would be here. Even if the problem cannot be 100% solved, all types of travel have their own dangers. He had lived with enough of them on the Kirkstand 556677. At a certain point, the convenience of the technology outweighs the risk. This was a big W for Jervik. He assumed the majority of the backers would bail after this show. Only those with the fortitude of future sight would hold fast their wealth in this pit of misfortune. The side business, he could still maintain growth. It would be stifled at first, but over time, he would rebuild. Jervik thought back to the old tales of history, the suppression of nuclear technology on Earth. It was one of the most famous lessons you could learn. Technology that threatens the power construct will always be suppressed. When a technology is so grand it breaks those principles and rewrites human existence, those holding their old ways crumble before it. Everything in this age ran off nuclear. Without its full development, space travel would not be viable. Stargates are no different. There will be setbacks, and people will push back, and it will be delayed and defunded. Jervik would hold fast to funding it, using what he had gained so far as a small stepping stone to the future he imagined. He would lose a significant amount of wealth at first. If he had not built his shipping business, he would most likely be bankrupt. He would reinvest the earnings of his company to regain those losses within a few hundred more years. This would be a task made for him. If he was the sole investor that made this technology viable, he would be the next Ted Hildrant, the inventor of the Hildy engine, the one and only engine to ever be built capable of space travel. It also incorporated the cryochamber into the design, an infinite source of energy in infinite time. The concept made him a galactic household name. Now they would say, Helsing Gates. The gates of hell opened, and upon the dark side was the heaven that we all forsake. He laughed at his musings of grandeur, thinking back to that day in the engine room, covered in sweat, barely breathing, thinking he needed to change his life before he died. What a thing, to think only 3 years had passed since then. Taking charge of his destiny had been so easy. The dreams he held of owning something grand, his name plastered upon the lips of the rich and powerful, stirred something in him, not as powerful as the thought of the lines on a graph shooting to the stars. But one could have many dreams, each a scale different from another, grand and minuscule. They were dreams nonetheless. Jervik spent time researching how the evolution and spread of the quantum entanglement data system cryptostock played out, attempting to mimic the trends. He bought the dip several times over the next 50 years. He had a system now to rotate his captains to create the least route timing possible, allowing for the most manipulation of the market. The staggered check-ins helped to facilitate a greater hold over the market as it developed. Jervik now had more than 50 captains under him, running routes 15 to 30 years apart. He had told the captains at any point if they wished to retire, they could take their shares of the company and retire peacefully. These were not the type of people he had chosen, however. He had known the feeling of adventure and farsight of these captains, allowing them to create a group of people who, over the course of several hundred years, became the biggest investors and holders of Stargate technology. A thought had dawned on Jervik one day while he was wasting his time at a station dock, looking through the files of potential customers and employees. He quickly composed a letter to the head of Stargate Technology Incorporated, requesting that if at any point the product is ready to be shipped, he has a company and truckers to do the job. He explained his background and his investment records. Perhaps this would gain their attention. Multi-purpose use of his halls, build the Stargate reputation while building his own, hold them hand in hand. It would be a fantastic way to play both sides if it ever came down to the technology being subdued by some government entity. Pure scope of the technology and how travel currently worked proved this impossible to control in a meaningful way. Only the datasets from the quantum entanglement computer would be sufficient to catalog it all. Enforcing it, on the other hand, was a rather ridiculous notion. The system was built so it could facilitate the wants of the people without direct oversight. It had done its job magnificently. Now it would be the door through which the next adventure in the fate of humanity would be taken, from virtual to physical. Jervik put his feet up and leaned back. He pulled out a cigar from his fine coat and smelled it. Fresh Colton Reserve tobacco. Finest weave and seed this side of the wing. He had gotten used to this lavish life. He wanted more. He knew since this idea had come to him that he could not accept no as an answer. He needed to be the vessel, just as he had done many years ago with the quantum tech. The purveyor of newly structured systems, breaking the old and creating a new, more powerful structure. He saw the end of cryosleep as a necessity. Maybe he could find a living where he might interact with other people and become a member of society once more. He did long for the end of this ruthless passage of time. Other than the numbers in his portfolio, he had no one to live for. He entered the stasis pod, pondering if he should ask for extra funds on credit to build a fleet for the company. It had been several years since he went into his pod full of life and energy. He almost ran to the terminal when he woke up at the end of his trip. He had returned to the beginning of it all. The behemoth loomed before him. He recalled that day on the Kirkstand, when he pushed himself to be more than a backwater space trucker. He was now a business owner, here to negotiate with the person he once was. A tough nut to crack on this. He was the talk of the stations, a captain like no other. Jervik had to meet this man who is said to be the oldest trucker still alive. Such grand musings would, at that time, have been beyond him. Now he was here, ready to negotiate a life-changing contract. Securing this would flood captains to his airlock. He docked to the Struggler's Cove in the business and financing department. He had never been to a place of status before. It was a completely new world. He had, up to this point, been able to resist the need for any implants. If he was going to be the man at the top now, he needed to use the weapons available to him. He opened his eyes. It was disorienting at first, but after a few weeks, he was used to it. The routes he had to take to make this meeting left him 5 months short. He would use that time to familiarize himself with the workings of the more sophisticated technology on a scale he had only imagined. Modern technology is interfaced through the Neuralink, a terminal at a thought. Jervik set up his user interface to have a constant view of the stocks. He arranged and managed windows for specific purposes, a complete personalization of his vision. He had speeches and bullet points set to his command. He would join this meeting, appearing to be fodder. He would show these men of wealth that intelligence and cunning are two very different things. "The auditor will see you now." A message popped up into his vision. The meeting was beginning. He flipped through all the pages quickly, checking that everything was in place so he couldn't miss a beat. The formal handshake into a slight bow, an old gesture from a relic of ancient Earth, still had the power to give and take livelihoods. He had practiced etiquette and mannerisms. The expressions and approval from the rest of the board gave him an inner gratification he refused to show. He sat and listened to the speeches, heard the complaints, sat through the lectures. The moment had finally come. "Mr. Helsing, do you have anything to add?" He flipped a few pages from his notes, refreshing his memory. "Yes. As you know, I was invited because of my substantial support of the business over such a long period of time. Trucker breed is usually a die-alone career. Spend your life moving from one corner of the galaxy to another. You pick up some things in that time, though. I pay attention to people, their thoughts and ideas. I see how they work. Using the past as a guide, I predict outcomes at a very good rate. This has led to a rise in wealth I would never have imagined. Once I set my sights on a better life, I feel like I was already here. It's an honor to be among such prestigious men." He continued. "I have done my homework. Since the incident at the test, public faith in the project has plummeted. I plan to restore that faith and boost our stock, not with a select few with great wealth, but to a great many with few wealth." He had them sitting on the edge of their seats. They had seen him come this far. He had yet to stumble. They had long cast aside their doubt and began to accept this might be a piece of the puzzle they had been missing, an insider to tell them how to advise and promote to the common people who believe this technology is not viable to their current life. He proposed a marketing campaign at the Central Trade Hub to show off the premise and ideas of the Stargate. The fact a trucker would be behind it could let the common folk relate more. The hub was only used for the high end of society, where the wealthiest went to acquire services from companies. It was perfect for promoting. People had forgotten how to be creative. Jervik may not be the most intelligent, but he was very creative. With a successful pitch of their recruitment plan, he moved to his main objective. "If you would bear with me for just one more proposal. I've been amassing a fleet of trucking vessels and captains. Since I originally facilitated the full expansion of the Humanity Conglomerate United Association through dispersal quantum entanglement updates to allow the galaxy to connect, I think it would be fitting to also accomplish that under my name with the Stargates, when they are ready." The board agreed. As they had no connections to shipping or trucking companies, this would solve many problems in one. With a new outlook towards the future, a secured place of wealth promising the highest status and widest spread of his name, his final goal would be to name the gates Hellgates. It was an irony he thought would serve well. The idea of the danger would be placed at the forefront and the public would become numb to its presence. For now, his job was to market the luxury of Stargate technology, to present it in a light people could not comprehend. Travel from the sandy beaches of a paradise resort world to your workstation in moments. No more station living. Population could separate its wings to true homes. Not the mechanical luminaries that shifted to your whim. They were cold and unfeeling. True visions of nature are felt, not seen. Jervik stood at the base of the Struggler's Cove. He was docked in a place he never expected he would find himself. The Central Trading Hub. A solar system-sized colossal city. It contained almost everything there was under the roof of mankind. The station provided a physical location for the promotion and demonstration of products. The wealthiest of humanity came here to indulge in the grand designs that pressed and measured in scope of human ingenuity. engineering, and innovation. The most outstanding upcoming technology had the main show floor, an entire planet dedicated to only the finest and most advanced products. Jervik would be on the moon that orbited the main showroom, more of an assortment of lecture halls. These facilities were used to describe and pitch the ideas of the technology, to answer questions from investors, and to perform the legal, legislative, and bureaucratic aspects. His first few months were adjusting to the working conditions, living off ship, and worst of all, having to deal with other people. He took this as a self-improving moment. He set up the schedules for seminars, researched the galaxy's top 100 richest people, families, or companies, and considered how these would interact with the Stargate system and improve their systems. Travel was always the biggest hurdle. With his presentations prepared, he began slow and measured. He found pride in the work. People were astonished at the depth of the concepts he presented. He even added in the name Hellgate as an example for a segue into the dangers and downsides of the technology, as well as the ways they were combating this and comparing it to other technology, death rates, accidents, acceptable loss, insurance, regulation, distribution, and most of all, military application. The thought of it had sparked some minds to dark places, asking whether the abuse of such technology or a monopoly on such technology could cause a whole new revolution in society, connecting the long-lost outer stations to a whole of humanity, the availability of standardized government oversight which is done in regards to all technology. The explanation of integration and implementation was solved. All that had to be done was spread the word and find those interested in being the first. Jervik compiled a new list of supporters and backers, new captains and trucker companies wanting to do collaborations. The 5 months he had been on the station were as successful as he could have anticipated. The preparation had sold most of the people. No matter what questions they asked, he had an answer, even if it was made up on the spot and refined over time. The intricate knowledge of the galactic structure, having visited thousands of stations in his 25 years of trucking, gave him an edge that pushed his confidence. He had learned many skills while he was here. He felt much more personable, having so many complex conversations with people, having to be polite and courteous, while the next meeting would be over drinks and laughs. The different kinds of people and how to deal with them was one of the reasons he was fit for the outer stations. They were in the worst of conditions and would display that. Having survived that many of them hardened him to the ways of most people. Here, it was a social gesture, a bow, a wink, a firm handshake. Through their demeanor, he could read them like a book. He would strip them of the text and replace it with his own. Even after all of this, he pondered that itch in the back of his mind. This was furthering his goals, but he felt it was time to move on. He had options. Others had offered and even started their own seminars to cover more ground. A true businessman, he could turn anything into an advantage. He missed the thrill of waking up, not knowing. It was like being a kid again. He longed for those moments. Jervik conveyed his request to the board members, stating he had a replacement. His progress was secured. He mixed open space, the trek, the hall. It called to him as much as the numbers did. Watching the station disappear from view as he began a new route, it felt like home here. He was saying goodbye to a stagnant dream. He would not live his own. The Struggler's Cove had served him well, but now it seemed beneath him. The next ship would be pristine, a true yacht for his newly acquired extravagant chase. He would not simply buy one, he would custom order design one from scratch, perfect to fit all his needs. He spent several weeks of his first route messaging companies and using the connections he had gained during his time grounded. With all the preparations set, he sank into cryostasis pod, so excited to see the fruits of his labor materialize before his eyes. The thought he would stay awake for days for this feeling if sleep was not forcefully induced. The sight was magnificent, truly awe-inspiring. The plain gray and beige color betraying the intricacies of the design, inspired by the imaginings of the grand old ships of Earth that ruled the seas in the days before the Industrial Age. Jervik smiled to himself. It was as extravagant as his ambitions at this point. He could still feel that itch, though something calling in the distance. Creative liberty indeed. He shook the hand of his compatriot. The man gestured towards the ship. "What is she to you?" he asked Jervik. "A maiden's navel," he jested, explaining his naming convention. "So on paper, it is M4I D3N. N4V41. He couldn't keep the facade anymore and laughed. He saw on the man's face that look he always tried to stay away from. His time on the Central Hub Station had not changed his mannerisms. It's mine after all. Names are a game I play with all my ships. This one will be the benchmark of a grand new age. Jervik patted the man on the back. I am sad to see you go. You will be remembered through this masterpiece you created. The man's face now looked perplexed. Jervik knew he would never understand those words. They began the inspection, and before long Jervik was accumulating to the ship. The technology was similar to the Central Hub. This was top of the line now. Fully augmented internal reflectors so you could customize the ship as you saw fit. Millions of options, and with pixel-by-pixel creation, AI for placing images from your mind directly onto the walls. For marketing purposes, Jervik chose to maximize the effect of the presence inside of the ship. The selling point of the outside was extravagance, and the inside was personal and cozy. His next mission was to inspect possible locations for the first few Hellgates. With this lure, he would catch his fill. The most effective means to selling this product to the population was not through efficiency. It was for the wealthy and privileged. The planet resorts, the executive luxury accommodation centers, solar cruise lines. Begin the day at a fabulous spa planet, one step away to a paradise SeaWorld, another to a floating city overlooking a mountainous jungle. The possibilities were endless. The ad slogans and campaign ideas railed through his head as he undocked from the station. His new beauty in hand, his first destination was a resort on the most famous world in the galaxy, Gorgon 451. The purples, oranges, and yellows of the atmosphere pressed against the shadow of a gas giant in a trinary system, one outer blue dwarf and two inner merging M-class yellow dwarfs. The atmosphere of the gas giant bent the light around it, causing dazzling displays across the planet. The water sparkled a dark purple with specks of light blue. The islands strewn across this water world were treated as a singular room. Rent an entire island on this beautiful spectacle that the universe has never seen. If the technology advanced enough, they could have gates between the islands and not even need ships. The changes that could be made for convenience alone were worth the cost. He docked the maiden naval, landing on the designated island. A delegation of several servants, 2 lawyers, and owners of the system greeted Jervik with a slate of legal documents and requests for information. He had expected this from such a formal institute. He had everything prepared, sending the information directly to the proper lawyer. They smiled and approved. He had passed the first test. The tense atmosphere he had expected was already shattered. They left Jervik to his inspection. He had 3 days to see the extent of this island's luxurious resort. This was the first time he had been anywhere that truly shook his being. The colors and view of the suns, the gas giant, several moons, all on the background of an aurora that spanned from horizon to horizon. Jervik experienced the greatest delights of the galaxy, food that he had never imagined could exist, a sense of peace and belonging, accommodation and respect. Yet through it all, he could only think about the next trip and the gains made in that time. Every time Jervik woke from his cryosleep, he had 2 screens set in his vision. His elation at the numbers made him blink and clap. As the trips passed on for the next several hundred years, the Stargate technology became more stable. It now met the minimum safety requirements to be established as a regulated source of travel. The main prototypes were tested by the military as a prerequisite to allow regulatory approval. With his list compiled, Jervik prepared the final stage of his plan, the distribution of gates through his company. He would haul the important ones himself. He had planned the routes and given orders to try to accumulate the largest trucking fleet ever established to propel the galaxy into a new age. The years melted away as the Stargates spread from being only accessible by most wealthy to allowing private purchase of Stargates. The technology still had some drawbacks, and there were a few setbacks with accidents. But with all technology, those incidents faded into memory as the convenience outweighed people's fear. Jervik was now among the top 1,000 richest people in the galaxy. He had secured his own homeworld and built a resort on it, the gambling empire of casinos, bars, and airlock lust. He had created a haven for the lower class to reach. Having come from the lowest of the low, he wanted to offer those at the bottom the chance to see what the top was and perhaps climb to it. There were no charges to enter. All you needed was to apply and wait. The waiting list, however, was over 5,000 years long. Since the only cost was getting there, and that was through a Stargate, the process was vetted to prevent abuse. It happened, but most of the time, you stuck out like a sore thumb as a high-class individual among what they would consider scum. Jervik basked in the glory of his creation. He felt he had made a place in the world for himself. He still longed to see the scope of possibility for the growth of his wealth. Could he buy entire systems and create a corner of the galaxy for the fallen? He built an underground space dock where he left the maiden naval. He spent his time delegating control of the business and hiring anyone he could when he found a recruiting problem that needed to be solved. He simply wanted to be the last resort to reach if a problem occurred. It began small. A year here, 2 years there, then 10 years. The resort company flourished. His trucking business was thriving. The Stargate technology was as cheap as it could be, accessible to the general public. Most people had one in their house or on their ship. The decades bled into centuries. Jervik thought back to all his experiences of how he had gotten here, the security of his wealth, the status and influence it offered him. He had used it all vicariously, taking it and appointing it as a station to be overlooked and acted on. His worries and woes bled away. Jervik looked at the graphs. They had steadied out over the last 100 years. The peak of the technology had passed. He was losing his elation. The next step was 1,000 years, then 10,000, finally 100,000 years. Jervik blinked as his heart began to race, a feeling he had not felt in a millennia. He felt his head spinning as panic lurked into his soul. The feed on his vision was blank. The connection severed. Leaving the maiden naval and returning to the surface, the sight shocked him. He looked down as he clasped his chest, his frail, weathered skin hung to his bones, sagging, spots and wrinkles prevalent. He pressed his hand to his face. He had let it all slip away in the pursuit of that high he couldn't replace. That struggle had led him here, to the end of it all. He looked across the broken, stagnant landscape, the aged and decayed buildings, the fallen platforms and signs strewn through the streets. Not a soul to be found. He looked to the sky and almost shouted with joy. The Stargate was still there. He could see it orbiting, perfectly undisturbed. He leapt into the captain's seat and began the dialing program. He spent several hours going through the list of possible destinations. The fear was rising in him once more. The list was running out, and he had yet to be able to establish any connection. He thought to old numbers from the far stations he delivered gates to. His memory was charred. He had relied on the system too much. He had once thought he was the last man to do complicated math in their head without the assistance of technology. He had abandoned that life long ago for extravagance and the lure of high class. He had let it consume him and drag him to the end of what could be humanity. Now he mused that he might be the last human alive. At last he had made a connection. He steadied himself as he lifted the ship off the docking bay and flew into the atmosphere. It had been ages since the ship had flown, but it seemed no worse for wear. He stared into the portal as it grew on the vision screens. He had tried to hail, but there was no response. His last resort was to hope for the best. He had traveled through gates so many times, it was as entering an airlock. But this was different. Every inch of his being was screaming for him to abandon this attempt, cut his losses and attempt to call for help in another way. He knew it was futile, though. If the link was down, there had been a major change in the last 100,000 years. Jervik took a deep breath and closed his eyes as he steered the maiden naval towards the unknown.